I was just getting started. Can everyone hear me all right now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just going to jump in and tell you a little bit about how, we got started. Becky adopted her kids in the 2000s, and, you know, even at that point, the cost of adoption was high, and she wondered, how are people going to become parents if they can't afford this? What's the option? She wanted to give to an organization that does what we do. But when she looked at the organizations that existed at the time, they were all pretty restrictive. A lot of them were religiously based, only accepted applications from heterosexual couples, which is not something that they felt they wanted to support. So Becky decided we're going to start our own. We're going to help everyone. That's our goal. Single parents, LGBT parents, people with no religion. We want to help them all, and we want to help all types of adoption as well. So just setting that PowerPoint back up. Right. So some of the ways to offset the cost of an adoption. These are some examples. Some of them you may have heard about before, but they're all good things to look into. The federal adoption tax credit, of course, it's a tax credit and not a refund. So if you don't have any tax liability for the year, you aren't able to, get a refund on top of that. But you are able to apply it for up to 5 years. So if you have, a $5,000 liability this year, you can get a $5,000 refund from that, and continue to apply it until the full benefit is realized. I believe the last time I checked, it was 13,500, but it may have gone up since that point. And it's a good way to, let's say you take out an adoption loan, you can use that to help pay off the loan. Other options, employer benefits. It often comes in the form of a reimbursement after the adoption is complete. You can look into it with your own companies. Some people don't even realize their company offers things like that. Other options are, you can talk to the company and see about instituting one. And also we've had applicants of ours who have taken on, a second job at a place like Starbucks solely to get the adoption benefits that the company offers. Of course, that's not an option for everybody. People have full-time jobs and can't take on a second job, but it is something to consider as well. Loans are, of course, always an option, and there are some places that offer lower rate adoption loans. So rather than having to take out, a 15% interest rate personal loan, there are some credit unions and things like that out there that offer low interest ones. The ones that I've found are primarily religiously based, but there are some out there that are at least a little bit lower that are not. So that the America's Christian Credit Union offers some, a Child Waits Foundation. Some of these also, I'm not quite sure their status post-pandemic. SoFi offers some fixed rate adoption specific loans, as well as Lightstream. And then of course, sliding fees, that's something to talk about with your agency. But that's something that you'd already be aware of at this point. Crowdfunding options, there's things like, we did it and things like that. And of course there's grants. There are a lot of grant options out there, not just us. They begin at just 500, and each grant organization has a lot of different requirements and eligibility restrictions and like when you should apply in the process. So you should be aware pretty early on that you should be looking at each one and seeing when they want you to apply. Some of them want you to apply after you've been matched. Some of them want you to apply after your home study. I'll go into a little bit more about what our requirements are and also about why in just a second. And there is a list of adoption loans or adoption grants that I really like. It's at fundyouradoption.tv. It's a very outdated list at this point. It was originally set up in 2018, but it is the longest, most comprehensive list that I've seen. And I will share that at the end of the presentation in the chat. So our grants, this is a need-based grant. It's a huge part of how we decide recipients. So I'll talk about that in more detail in another couple minutes. We do award grants quarterly. There's the possibility that we will increase that frequency next year, but it's not finalized at this point. Basically, just check our website to make sure that you're applying what the deadline is, and then also when that grant is going to be awarded. You can apply at any time. So, if you applied now, even though the deadline for this next grant cycle is in October, we would just hold that application until we make our decisions at the end of November, and you would be included for the next cycle. So there's no issue with applying early. You just might not receive an answer for a little bit longer than you would if you applied, right at the deadline. We do have an online save and return application, so you can get started on it now, save it, come back to it later. There's no application fee for us. We do award grants of up to $20,000. This amount is based on how much you have left payable to your agency and also your financial need in comparison to other applicants. Our average grant size is going to be about $10,000. That is substantially larger than most of the other grant organizations out there. We really try to take a huge bite out of what you need to complete. And we do ask you to ask for what you need on the grant application. Don't undercut it. Don't say like, if I see that you have a very low income and you're asking for $5,000 and your adoption costs $40,000, I'm going to wonder, if you're only asking for $5,000, how are you going to get there? How are you going to be able to get that remaining $35,000? And if you don't have savings, if you don't have a retirement, if you don't have a house to take out a home equity line of credit on, if I don't see an answer to that question, it's going to be a flag. At the same time, if I see you have lots of resources, I recommend not asking for the full $20,000 unless it's something that you can explain that you have a need for, that type of thing. We do consider all types of families. So again, married couples, single parents, LGBT families, and we do consider all types of adoptions. So domestic, international, and foster care. Foster care is obviously, it doesn't always have a ton of costs associated for it that would be applicable to us, but some children are coming out of foster care through an agency program, and those are usually the type of foster care adoptions we see. And again, we do support families of any religion as well. So jumping into demonstrating your financial need and kind of what it means, there's a difference between not wanting to write the check and not being able to. We're really primarily focused on people who are not able to write that check. That doesn't necessarily, like, let's say you can take out a loan or you can put it on credit cards and that loan rate is going to be 15%. We don't consider that to be just not wanting to. If you're having to take out loans that are drastically affecting your finances for decades to come, that's not something we want. And it's definitely a big concern. I highly recommend that before applying, you have already looked into loans and know the status of what your loan application would be. If I'm looking at one applicant who hasn't taken the time yet to look at loans and what their option would be, and they don't know if they're likely to be approved or if they're likely to have, just a 5% rate or something like that, versus an applicant who has already asked their bank, gone to that effort to make sure that if they were to be matched quickly, they would have an answer for how they're going to pay for it, and they've already been denied a loan or they've been told that their interest rate is going to be 15%. That's a huge factor in your favor, regardless of, maybe you even have a bit of a higher income than the other applicant. If they can be approved for a much lower interest rate loan and you can't be, huge thing in your favor. So again, we do look at income, we look at your debts. We get a lot of people with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debts. We look at your savings and your checking, we look at retirement savings. That's not to say that you know, we want you to have to clear out your entire retirement before paying for your adoption. It is something that we take into consideration. And if you're, you know, closer to 50, and you have, you know, a smaller amount in retirement than somebody who is closer to 30, obviously you have much less time to get those retirement savings back up. So we wouldn't want you to have to decimate your retirement in order to pay for it. We do look at your home value, your monthly mortgage, your mortgage rate. If you don't own a home, things like that. We will take into account whether or not you are offered paid family leave. You know, if you have to just take your 8 weeks of FMLA unpaid leave, versus somebody else getting 6 months paid leave, you know, that's a big difference. And then there are some other things that come into account as well. Do you have $100,000 in vehicle loans? I've seen people who apply to us with that and don't have a good explanation for why they needed to have that kind of thing. Was it for a job? Or, you know, why do they have a $50,000 car when they could have a car that's 5,000? Is there something, and that's fine, you know, we just want an explanation for it. And again, you know, that might be fine in comparison to other applicants, or maybe it's not. Maybe another applicant has sold their cars to try and pay for this adoption. And next up, so eligibility, you do have to have at least one applicant be a US citizen. Your home study needs to be approved by the time that you apply to us. And you need to be able to submit to us a copy of that home study. You can't be pregnant and you can't be trying to conceive at this point or pursuing any type of infertility treatment at the same time that you are pursuing an adoption. You again need to demonstrate financial need, and the child can't have been placed prior to applying to us. There are some exceptions to that, especially if you're adopting out of foster care or if you're pursuing a readoption situation. If you do have any questions about that type of that placement issue, I do encourage you just to reach out via email, or you can give us a call. Email is usually easier. And I'd be happy to answer and like talk you through if your situation seems like a good fit. Payments, so money is only payable to a licensed U.S. adoption agency or lawyer. We don't cover agency startup fees, and all of the funds that we provide really should be applied to the last fees that are due to your agency. Typically that's going to be at placement, but some places do require it at match. It really just depends on who you're working with. And then we only pay outstanding fees not yet paid to your adoption professional. So we couldn't pay for something that you paid to them with a loan and then reimburse you. It would have to be for something that's still outstanding. So regarding the online application, the application consists of 3 parts. There's the application, the personal statement, and then the supplemental documents that we require. The application questions are pretty straightforward. I would say it takes probably less than an hour to complete. It's like basic contact information, details about your adoption, whether it's domestic, international, your adoption professional, their contact, etc. And then information about your finances, your profession, your income, things like that. The personal statement, this is a huge portion of the application. It's basically our only real opportunity to get to know you and your family. This is your chance to tell us your story, why you need this grant. It should be at least 750 words and probably not more than about 1,500. That said, there's really no limit to how long it can be. I would say if you're much under 750 words, it's gonna be a concern. I feel like you can't tell your full story in that amount, and it's difficult with one that's that short, I've found, to make a real connection with the grant committee. The adoption professional expense sheet is one of the supplemental documents. If you're working with an agency or lawyer, they should provide a letter detailing what you've paid to date and future expenses. if you're working with a consultant, have them provide a letter as well, detailing what you've paid to them, what future expenses you can expect with them, and then a statement saying that depending on your match and matching agency or lawyer, you can expect future expenses in the range of, $10,000 to $50,000, just as an example. We understand it can vary a lot. And then we want a copy of your taxes from this year and the previous year. Let's see. And then, of course, the copy of your valid home study. When to apply for grants. Different grant organizations do, again, want you to apply at different times. For domestic adoption, we recommend that you apply after your home study is completed, primarily because you can come with a swift match and we won't award grants if you've already received placement. Unfortunately, because of our timeline, there are some people that fall through the cracks that they have their home study completed and the next week they receive a match and a placement. It's unusual, especially these days, to have such a quick placement, but if that does happen before we award our grants, unfortunately you do lose eligibility then. It's something that we hope to be able to offer in the future, that there's a little more wiggle room on that, but right now it's just not something that we have the resources to accommodate. International, we recommend after the child has been identified, and then adoption through foster care is just after home study completion. You can see the 2023 grant deadlines. The next one is going to be October 7th for an award in November. Again, we're still finalizing our dates for next year, but at least the first one with the award in February is still going to be about the same. It'll be probably the second Saturday in January. So I would consider both of those dates. If you think your home study is going to be complete like a little bit after the due date, I would say reach out to us. There's probably a little bit of wiggle room on that, as long as we get it before we start, finalizing our decisions. That should be fine. And the other thing I want to note on this page is that we do allow you to apply multiple times, and there are a lot of applicants who have received grants who applied more than once. So just because you've been rejected, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get a grant. It happens a lot. I do recommend that you absolutely reach out to us if you have applied and gotten a rejection. I'm very happy to pull up your previous application, go through it, see, was there something that stood out to me as an issue about the application? Maybe there was just a discrepancy. Maybe you reported your income as $50,000 a year, and actually your home study or your taxes stated that you were making a $100,000 a year income, and you didn't address that change in the application. Or maybe it was your personal statement was just too brief or didn't seem to really connect with the committee, or maybe it was, just it was a good application, but we have a lot of applicants, and unfortunately, at a certain point, we can only accept so many people each cycle. In that case, I would just let you know that and encourage you to apply again the next time. So all of that said, we do have some preferences and tips. Regarding income and finances, there's not a lot that you can do to improve how you do on that. But the more that you talk about, we offer a couple of like additional comments regarding your income or additional comments regarding your finances. If you have anything that you feel like you should talk about in those areas, really get into it. Say like, yes, my income is currently 100,000, but my husband was out of work for X number of months last year and we're still recovering from that. Or you can see that we have this medical debt, but this is the way that it actually affects us on a monthly basis. We are paying $2,000 towards that every month and have no wiggle room in our finances at all. So those are all good things to just like draw out, and you can also talk about those in your personal statement. Just anything to highlight really big financial issues that you have is always helpful. We do give some preferences to families who don't have a lot of grant options. So single women, LGBT, non-religious couples are somewhat more likely to receive a grant. That's something to consider. We do give preference in terms of hardship. If your family has been through a lot, that has made the adoption process difficult. So if you've been through infertility, if you've experienced a miscarriage, I highly recommend that you discuss that in your personal statement. I know it can be extremely difficult to talk about these kinds of things. But the more, our grant committee, for the most part, a lot of them are adoptive parents. They've been through this themselves. And if you can make that connection with them, it's really powerful and it can really help to increase your chances of receiving a grant. If you have experienced a failed adoption, we do take that into account as well. If you or your partner has been through any kind of a medical crisis, if you've gone through cancer treatments, if that's a fertility issue, definitely mention it, talk about it in detail. Or, if your finances or you were seriously affected during the pandemic, that's something that we're considering as well. Also, we take into account adoption circumstances. So if you're adopting a sibling group or a child with special needs or an older child, or if you're adopting a birth sibling of a child that you've adopted previously, we do take all of that into consideration as well. So definitely highlight it in your personal statement and at other points on the application that you feel are appropriate. We do give some preference as well to families who have not yet had the opportunity to be parents. So if you have multiple children and you are adopting domestically, I would say that your chances are lower. We, that is a factor, and it's something to think about. It really means that you have to put your best foot forward with the application. If you have 3 or more children, again, and are pursuing a domestic, you are going to have a fairly low likelihood of receiving a grant, unless there are extenuating circumstances like you are adopting a birth sibling or it is a special needs adoption. We do give some preference with regards to age. So if you're an older applicant, we feel that this is your last opportunity to become parents. You need the assistance. Younger families, we feel, do have more time to save for an adoption. That said, we do give grants to younger families all the time, and we do, it's not a 100% you're not going to get a grant if you're young or anything like that, just as a slight preference. Grants, if you have received significant funding from other grant organizations, you are less likely to receive a grant. We feel that you've already received significant help, and there are some people who have not received any. That said, even if you've received a grant, we do still consider you. It's just one more piece of the financial need puzzle that we're looking at. Some tips, just make sure everything, especially your financial information, is accurate. Hate when there are discrepancies. Make sure the documents that you attach can be opened and read, particularly the personal statement. If that's a corrupted file, it's likely that we're just going to pass on that. There may be a chance that if we love other things about your application that we would reach out, but otherwise, we can't reach out to every person that has not submitted forms correctly. If you are applying for a second time, again, make sure that you've actually read through and updated your application. So after a cycle is complete, we will reopen the applications of people who have not received a grant. So you don't have to fill out the whole thing again. You can go through and just update all the things that need to be updated. We do still sometimes add questions to the application. So again, that's why it's important to look through it and make sure that there aren't any new questions that you've missed. And then you'll also need to resubmit any of the documents that you submitted. Unfortunately, we just don't have the resources to keep all of the submitted documents on file attached to your application. And also for security purposes, since it's, home study and taxes are very personal information, we don't like to keep those sorts of things on file for an extended period of time. Finally, and I mentioned this earlier, but it's so important, so I do want to address it again, work on your personal statement, put as much motion into it as possible. It's just such a big part of the application. And if you're just writing a couple paragraphs or whatever, it's not going to make as big an impact. Also make sure that you read through it again. I can't tell you the number of times that we've received an application that is clearly just cut and paste the personal statement from their profile book, or that references a different grant organization in it. So they, you get to the third paragraph and they're like, please, gift of adoption, please give us this adoption grant. It's so important to us. Well, it wasn't important enough for you to read through the personal statement and make sure that you had the name of the organization that you're asking for a $10,000 grant for correct. So big things. I know it can be a little bit, it seems finicky, but this is a lot of money, and it's important to our donors that we do due diligence with that. And we also do, again, just make sure it's not like copied and pasted from anything else. So we've gotten ones that are like a statement of faith before. There are organizations that do require a statement of faith. That's not what we're asking for. Make sure that you read through what we're asking for on the personal statement section and are addressing, our general take on what it is. And let's see, just small tip, I prefer PDF or Word document, not pages. I've had difficulty opening those before. Try not to include pictures. We can't show those to the committee because we don't want to affect their decision in that way. We want it to be less subjective about how people look, at least. So I'm just going to have to take them out. Try not to do any strange formatting, just make it, a normal document. And again, have somebody proofread it. It's amazing how much of a difference that can make. So yeah, these are just some resources that we recommend for more information about adoption. And now we can jump into the Q&A, and I will put that link for the list of adoption grants in the chat now.
Thank you so much. I know it's really hard with grants because like my husband and I, when we were first starting the process to adopt our son, a lot of places wouldn't even consider us because my husband was raised Muslim and neither one of us go to church. So they were just like, nope, sorry, you have to be Christian, you have to go to church. So even for people who might have been raised Christian but don't necessarily still attend church, their options were significantly limited. So we love the fact that you're open to same-sex couples, single moms, and non-faith or alternative faith hopeful parents. So we have a few questions from the Facebook group. And then if anyone else has questions they want to add to the chat, or I believe there's an option to raise your hand or you can unmute yourself. Well, let's see. Some of these were about how many applications do you get per cycle?
We generally get between 250 and 350 applications. At this point, we're awarding $300,000 in grants every cycle. So that with a $10,000 grant, that normally average grant, that normally is going to come out to somewhere between 25 to 30 applicants. So it's about a 9% success rate.
Okay, that's a lot of people to have to go through.
Yes.
For.
Yes.
I guess that's a good indicator on the fact that adoption is just way too high if that many people are applying every quarter.
Yes. And some of those are, to be fair, repeat applications. So I should note that as well.
Okay. And then, so you guys don't do any grants where the baby has been placed in the home, but they haven't finalized the adoption yet?
Yeah, that if it's really close to the time that the grant is awarded, so let's say that our next date is going to be end of November and the baby's placed middle of November, there might be some wiggle room on that. Particularly if your agency is able to still, your agency has to be able to accept the funds. So sometimes agencies or lawyers can't accept and then refund you those funds. So that's a big reason.
So because I know there are some that will do like payments up until finalization. So if it's an agency where the baby has been placed, but the couple still has 6 months left of fees, then that could be a possibility.
It's
Maybe.
really not typical. If it, again, we're very close to when we're awarding the grant, yes, I would say we would still consider it. If the baby's placed like a month or two before the grant award, likely no.
Okay.
Unless it's an extenuating circumstance like it being an adoption from foster care. So those placements occur obviously earlier. Or we've had a readoption case where the child needs to be placed immediately, and so they're taken in on a foster basis before the adoption is finalized. So in that case, we would consider it. There also may be some issues sometimes with like a kinship adoption. We will very rarely consider kinship adoptions, and that would possibly be available. But if you have any questions about it, do feel free to reach out. But typically no.
Okay. Are there any age limitations for adoptive parents? Do they have to be over a certain age or under a certain age in order to apply?
No.
Okay. What about, are there any, since there are so many applications, is there anything that people could potentially do to make themselves stand out more? Is it making it longer? Is it just being more intentional with their personal statement?
Yeah, I do feel as long as you're meeting generally what we're looking for in terms of financial need, then the best thing is definitely going to be the personal statement. That's your opportunity. If I don't want to be crass about it, but if you can make one of the committee members cry, you are a shoo-in. Um, so it's hard to talk about all of these things. There are so many emotions mixed up with adoption and with, for many of us, the fertility process before adoption. But if you're able to get it out on paper,
And
it's
even
certainly
outside of
you.
that, so specifically within the Black community, we're
Mhm.
very like tight to the chest when it comes to problems that we're having, especially Black women. We don't like to ask for help. We're always like, there's, the trope of like the strong Black woman who's not allowed to be vulnerable. She's not allowed to be upset. And then when it comes to something like infertility, there's an added layer onto that. So no one wants to essentially like beg someone for help. And that's
Mhm.
nothing, even though it's not begging, this is literally here for this purpose, but it does feel like that. So I know there are a lot of people, there are people who don't even want to create an adoption profile book because they're worried about it like sharing too much information. So I know people probably will struggle with the statement of like having to be vulnerable, having to talk about it, why you need it. And I keep telling people like it's just something you're just gonna have to just, it's gonna be uncomfortable, but you're gonna have to do it. Like no one wants to come out and say, hey guys, my baby maker is broken, but so I need
Yeah.
help to become a parent.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will help some people get a little bit more comfortable, especially knowing that about 300 other people are taking the
Yes.
time to be vulnerable to try
Yes.
to get help. Because it's like, what's more important, your pride or becoming a parent? And it's not like the statements are going to be shared outside of the organization anyway. They're not going to be on Facebook. No one's going to post it with your picture.
There's about 5 of us who read it. And again, the grant committee is made up of people who have, for the most part, been through the same thing. They did this, 20 years ago, and they, yeah, I feel like they really connect with the journey that most of our applicants have been through.
We would hope so. So do you know of any other methods that you've seen that have been successful for paying for grants for paying for adoptions outside of grants? Like, do you see people typically getting a lot of loans? Do you know of any fundraisers in particular that have been really successful?
Fundraisers are so tough to me, because so much of it depends on your personal circle. But Yeah, I think, we do see some people that have had a lot of success with, like, there's some t-shirt fundraiser type things out there, and they're willing to work with you and help create t-shirts, or just even just fundraisers through Facebook. But if you are low income, a lot of times your social circle is going to be in the same situation that you are. So they don't have the resources to support you any more than, you could support them in the reverse situation. And I think that's really tough. That then the people that need it the most are the ones that have the hardest time with the fundraising.
Yeah.
Um, and to a certain extent, I feel like it's not something that you should pin your hopes on. It can be very discouraging to go out and do that type of fundraising. Um,
Yeah, I've
I
seen a
think,
lot of those where, because even with us, when we started, people would just be like, I don't understand like why you're saving money towards this. Like, why don't you just have your own baby? Like, well, if I could, I would. But I know within the Black community, there is the issue of the funds is a huge issue because
Mhm.
I'll have a consultant or an agency call me and say, hey, we have a baby here. The baby's been born. Discharges tomorrow. They're healthy. We need a Black couple or an interracial couple, preferably Black, but the fees are $46,000 and they need to be able to write the check at pickup.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, they just don't have $45,000 sitting to
Mhm.
where they can even write the check. And a lot of them feel like it's a big gamble, even if they did have the money, because some states have the revocation process, but most of us just don't have the ability to write a check for that much. Because I know what the most recent one was the baby was in Texas, so like we need Texas families. So I reached out to about 6 different families. I'm also in Texas and home study approved. But even me and my husband were both like, we can't swing it.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
else did the same thing. They're like, I would love to. Like, we are literally an hour from there. We just can't write the check. And the adoption professionals would be shocked. Like, I just don't understand. The baby's here and the baby's healthy. Like, they don't understand why someone is unable to write the check for that amount.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unbelievable how expensive it is these days. I mean, 45,000 in some cases is on the low side. We've seen a lot that are 70 now. Which is just,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
like
know.
the average is about 40, and I've seen them go up to 70. And then you have the adoption consultant fee on top of that, which is an additional $2,000 to $10,000. So when they start factoring all of these things, and then it's okay, well, the baby's out of state. So now I have to pay for a plane ticket and rental cars and hotels, but then you're not able to use your grant towards travel. So
Yeah, we can if the agency is willing to reimburse you for travel, we could theoretically pay out for that, but oftentimes, as large as our grants are within the grant community, they still aren't gonna typically pay for a full adoption, so there'll be enough in placement fees, through the agency that there wouldn't be any left over even for travel, unfortunately.
yeah. Oh, so that leads me to another question. So when a situation arises where a couple is awarded a grant through you,
Mhm.
you get matched, and the organization says, okay, we need a $20,000 match fee paid within 48 hours. They're unable to use the grant towards that match fee. Typically, it has to go towards the finalization.
It depends. Some agencies do require like the bulk of payment at match. In that case, we would make an exception and we would pay out towards match. But
Mhm.
if they have 20,000 due at match and then they also are going to have 20,000 due at placement, we would unfortunately only pay for the placement. The reason for that is that we do have a responsibility to our donors to ensure that the funds are going towards a completed adoption. And there would be a concern that if we pay out at match and we pay that $20,000 and then it gets to placement and they still don't have the funding to cover that remaining 20, what's happening with the match? Does
Yeah,
that make
there's
sense?
some, yes, because there are some that where they charge you at match a good chunk of it, and then
Mhm.
there's a fall off where either the expectant mom cuts off contact with the agency, or it's a social worker or an agency that's really operating more like a facilitator, and really all they're doing is initiating that match. But then it's
Mhm.
up to you to continue it off with a different agency or your adoption attorney. So I understand why you wouldn't want to put it towards the match, because we don't know the validity of the match. Like how strong is this match? Especially if it's early on. Like if the mom's only like 10 weeks pregnant, a lot can happen in those
Yeah.
extra.
That said, we have worked with a few agencies that they have like nothing do at placement and it's all do at match. We are again willing to pay out in that case at match. And we have had some cases where, revocation happens and or a match fails and we had paid out at match. And I should just touch on that in case anybody has questions about it. Um, if there were funds that were refunded, we would ask that they're refunded to us and we would hold the funds for your next match. If it were a situation where in order to refund our money, the recipient would have to then pay the organization more money to cover those lost fees, we would just write off the money at that point. We don't want you to have to pay extra money for a match that has failed already. Um, but unfortunately, you would not get any extra additional funding to cover your future
Yeah,
match.
so if they apply for the grant, they get awarded the full 20,000, that gets paid towards an agency match fee, that match gets disrupted, then that's it. They can try to apply again at a different point, but
Unfortunately, no. If we've paid out money we don't do multiple grants to the same family. So if
okay.
we've already paid out, we do view it as, at least that 20,000 that was lost, at least it wasn't your money. And that's like, if it had been your money that was lost, then you wouldn't have money, hopefully, for the next one. Does that make sense? So we
Mhm.
still think of it as being assisting your adoption, hopefully, that is eventually completed, but we
Uh-huh.
want to award additional funds for it.
Okay. And then, so do a lot of people typically try to do like grant stacking, where they will try to get as many grants as possible to try to cover the bulk of the fees?
I do think that that happens a lot. It's not something I wish it was something that wasn't necessary because it feels like a lot of duplicated work, both on the grant recipient or the applicant's part and on the parts of the organizations that are giving them those grants. It is one of the reasons why we try to award larger grants in comparison so that you don't have to keep doing all of these like you've got enough that you're worrying about if you're going through the adoption process. There's already tons of forms and fees, and you still have to get ready for a baby at the end, and that's enough
You have
work
to
on its
feed them
own.
afterwards and buy all of the stuff.
Right. And also on top of that, when we award our grants, a big part of it is making sure that you are going to get to the finish line with our money.
Mhm.
So, we like to hope that you won't need to keep taking out additional grants. I also think it's really hard. It's really hard to get multiple grants, and it's not something I encourage people to think that they can do. We have a less than 10% success rate. That's true for a lot of organizations.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of them do take into account that, oh, you've already gotten help from somebody else. You're a little less likely to get help from us then. So I think planning to pay for the entire adoption with multiple stacked grants it's not something we recommend.
And it's probably not really feasible.
You know, if it's a if there's a lot of extenuating circumstances, if you're adopting a high special needs medical risky child, I think that you have a decent chance at trying to accomplish that. But even then, it's tough. It's tough to get a grant.
Yeah, I was trying to explain to my mom, well, I just left her house, and she just, I just don't understand why these fees are so high. Like, these need to be free. I'm like, well, no one's gonna do free private adoption. Private, like, if you want a free adoption, that has to be foster care. But even then, sometimes you have to pay some fees, but then they might end up like paying you back with like a stipend or something. But
Mhm.
private adoption is insanely expensive. And JD is saying that the fees are higher than they've heard before, and the numbers create concern. And it's like they range from organization to organization. Like, I've seen some that come in that are 20,000 to 25,000 because it's a smaller organization. They don't have a lot of overhead, or the mom lives in a state that has really strict birth mom expenses laws. And then I see some that are coming out of Florida where moms are getting up to like $17,000 in living expenses, and
Mhm.
the cost of living is higher. So it really varies off of the organization and whatever the expenses that the mom has. But still, it is very much like sticker shock, especially when you always hear, oh yeah, just adopt a baby. It's fine. You can just adopt. And people just always think of foster care adoption,
Mhm.
and they don't realize like, oh, we have to pay social workers, and you got to pay the attorney, and all of these other fees that are stacking up on top of the initial fee. And a lot of people don't even realize that the adoption consultant isn't, whatever you're paying your adoption consultant doesn't go towards your actual adoption fees through the agency. Or if you sign on with one of the like marketing platforms that make you pay like a huge chunk of money upfront to increase your exposure, a lot of people think that that fee is how much the total adoption is going to be. And then they get in touch with an agency, and the agency's like, oh no, this is going to be $30,000, but here's a list of grant opportunities you can try to apply for. And then you're on there. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I didn't know I was going to have to pay for all of these extras on top of being able to just take a
I've
baby.
seen somebody like an agency that reduces the overall cost of what they present to you because they apply the adoption tax credit to the final line item. So
Okay.
they like, let's say their adoption is going to be 30 grand. They tell you it's going to be 17 because, oh, wait, you can use the adoption tax credit in order to cover that extra 13. It's like,
But you still have to pay the full 30 up front in order to be able to adopt, and not everybody qualifies for the adoption tax credit.
yeah,
So
I do think it can be somewhat deceptive. I think at least the ones that are saying that it's 70, it's gonna be 70.
yeah.
Um, I think that's a horrific number to see.
Mhm.
And I don't fully understand why these places are quite as expensive as they are. I think in some situations, I can't imagine it being justified.
I always
Um,
try to get an itemized like fee schedule. So we
mhm,
get adoption situations sent to us from consultants, agencies, and attorneys from all over the country. And I'll ask them, do you have a fee breakdown? Because the people are going to want to know where the money is going to, like what it's paying for.
mhm,
Had an attorney tell me that she does a lot of digging into any situations that like her clients come to her with. And so she'll say, why are you charging X amount of dollars for medical expenses when she's on Medicaid? And then they say, oh, sorry, we assumed and we put that in there, so we'll take it out. Or they'll put in a line item for groceries, and then they find out that the mom is on food stamps and WIC. So her groceries are already paid for. So sometimes they will add fees in, and unless you notice what it is and then ask them about it, then, oh, I'm so sorry. We copied and pasted this from the last mom who was in the same state. And so it does
sure
get
they did.
very sticky when it comes to fees, but being able to know that there's some ways to get some assistance is helpful, even though I still don't feel like it should be, it
Yeah,
shouldn't cost this much.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then we have another question. Somebody wants to know, do all the grants have to go through the agency?
Yes, we are only able to pay out either to a lawyer or to a licensed adoption agency.
Okay. So if you are using an adoption facilitator, this will not work for you.
Yeah, well, typically in those we get lots of people who are using one. but then there's still going to be a fee
Mhm,
after the facilitator, because there's at least required court costs, which are going to be $5,000 with lawyer at the very least.
mhm,
But normally a facilitator or consultant will just connect you with the final placing agency, which will have their own fees. And
mhm. I know the consultants, facilitators they usually try to work like an agency, but they're not licensed. And but then they'll charge the couple like $30,000, say, yeah, we'll find you a mom. And
yeah,
they're not doing anything within the state laws. And then
yeah.
it was like, oh yeah, I know there was a lady in California who's currently facing trial for getting like millions of dollars from people promising them babies, and none of it was legal.
Oh my gosh.
So
The number of times this story has come up in the news too is disturbing.
yes, very, very much so. Does anyone else have any other questions or anything, or is there any other information that you want to add that you feel like would be beneficial for people, like especially people within our community who are trying to adopt?
Um, let's see. I do think that because there are fewer applicants who are Black that we receive as grants, you do have a likelier chance of receiving a grant. And I'm gonna say that that's true for most organizations. Everybody, wants to have a good reflection of society as a whole. And I think that, you know, fill out applications, see what you can do. And discussing, any difficulty that you have faced as a person of color in your personal statement. I think that's something to add in. Especially within, the adoption community and how that's affected your adoption journey. I know you were talking before about how difficult it can be within the Black community to discuss fertility and adoption issues. And I think that's something that if you want to bring that up in your personal statement, that would certainly speak to difficulty that you've faced, and would be a consideration.
I know Becky was saying that they were trying to make more of an effort to award more grants to Black hopeful adoptive parents. The issue is just that they weren't applying. And so she's
We
like,
do
well,
not receive many
us to
applications.
award grants to these people when they're not applying for it. So it's hard to say like, here guys, come take this money when they're not even here.
Yes, yes. We have that issue with more than one, marginalized community. We have a lot of difficulty getting LGBT applications as well. And it's like the money's here for you if you want it.
We have
Um,
both. We've got the Black couples and then we also have the Black LGBT couples. So we have a vast variety of people here who are
Wonderful.
trying to adopt, and we're just facing the struggles with the fees that come up. And so hopefully we get more people to apply, because I had 3 people just got awarded from our group over the past weekend. And so we look forward to having more. And then JD's raised his hand or her hand, can't tell which one is which, so sorry.
Hi, I'm a woman. Yeah,
Oh,
hello.
hi.
Hi. I just sorry, I'm a little bit late to the party, but I caught like sort of the last 30 minutes. I did have some questions in the chat. I'm getting the cue that you're closing out, and I wanted to make sure that they were seen before we go, if there's still a little bit of time to answer those.
Yes,
Yeah, I just saw those. I think the question regarding profile books is that's more of a question that you would handle.
oh, for like, if you're looking for like an adoption profile book that you would present for the expectant mom, or are you looking for like a guide to applying for grants?
All of it. I have no idea about any of it.
Okay, well, we can help you with the adoption profile books. We have a designer who's amazing. She has amazing templates, so we can help you with that. Also with the grant guide, we just added one to the website because one of our board members was awarded a $20,000 grant that went towards her adoption, and she recently got placed. So she put together a guide for us that I literally just added to the website like an hour ago.
When
So
you say Jordan, when you say website, are you referring to the Facebook group or an actual website? I don't know about a website,
Oh,
so.
yes, we have an actual website. It's noireadoption.com, and I can send you the information for it there.
Could you put it in the chat? Oh,
Yes,
the link to the website, please? Thanks.
I'll add it to there as well. And then you had a question about, did you have a different question about age, or you just wanted just the general?
Just the general. I noticed there were a couple of website private adoption agencies that I saw. Oh, well, this is for the grant, so I guess that's totally separate from a private agency. The age criteria. Okay, never mind. I think I'm answering my own question as I'm talking. There's two different sets of criteria for two different organizations. Okay.
And then
Yeah, we, as a grant organization, we don't have age requirements. Of course, some agencies will.
Okay.
And then for income cap, we don't personally have an income cap, but it is a need-based grant. So we will take it into account. I would say that I don't think we've ever given one over like 150.
for 150
What do you mean? Are you talking about a cap at 150? What do you mean when you say that?
So again, we don't have a set cap. We don't say like if you make over this amount, don't apply. Because we, we've always then at one point our cap might have been 100,000, but since then we've certainly awarded a lot of grants over 100,000. So we don't ever want to limit it entirely. Just because each cycle is different and who we see each cycle and how you're compared with other applicants, and maybe you make 200,000, but there's a lot of extenuating circumstances that mean that that's not an accurate reflection of your finances. So again, no set income cap, but that said, we have not, to my knowledge, awarded a grant where the income was higher than 150 at any point. So if you are over 150, I would say that your likelihood of receiving a grant is very low. And I would say if you are in the 110 to 150 range, your chances are going to be based on who else applies at the same time as you, what the average income for that particular pool of applicants looks like. And we're also going to be looking a lot more at like, do you live in New York City or do you live in the middle of Iowa with a $120,000 income? Do you have a ton of student loan debt? Do you have a ton of medical debt? Do you live in a house that you bought for $200,000 5 years ago, or did you decide to buy a $1 million house a year ago? That sort of thing. But yeah, again, not a set income cap.
But if
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Go ahead.
someone who's bringing in like millions of dollars and you just don't feel like you should have to pay any adoption fees, then
it's not the grant for you. That said, I don't think anybody should have to pay this much in adoption fees, even if you're making that much money.
especially for our community, like there is such a need for Black hopeful adoptive parents, interracial hopeful adoptive parents, and then even like Black single moms or Black single parents. So we would think that since there is a significant need for it, that agencies would try to make some types of concessions for it if they're seeing, okay, the only reason why these situations aren't getting matched with Black couples is because the Black couples are saying our fee structure is too high. Maybe we should look at our fee structure. But instead, they will just either keep trying to convince us to just write the check or tell the mom, we don't have any Black couples.
Yeah,
for you
that
to look at.
they do. They do. They just aren't willing to
Yeah.
reduce the fees for it. That is, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And then if anybody has any other questions, what is the best way for them to get in touch? Do they want them to email you directly or go through the contact form on the website?
We have, I would send it to our primary email, which is just info@helpusadopt.org. And those will generally just get, I'll wind up answering them. And if you have a more complex situation that you're asking about, feel free to call as well. But
All right. And before we
I'm
go,
happy to answer questions.
no, thank you so much. And then before we go, just wanted to say again that our board member Kim was awarded a $20,000 grant with helpusadopt.org. So she put together a grant guide that is available at the link I put in the chat there. So it goes through how to apply for the grant, how to do the statement, how to prove the need, and then a list of other grants and loans that you can apply for. She said it took her about 3 days to just gather the information. So she's packed everything down into just a little PDF to make everyone's lives a little bit easier and hopefully get more of us applying for these grants so we can get more of us awarded.
Jordan, would you mind sending me that? I would love to take a look at it.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yes. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And thank you everybody who tuned in, and then everybody who's going to watch the replay. Thank you so much. And, you know, I just love this community and I'm just happy to be here.
Thanks so much. It was great speaking with all of you. And yeah, Jordan, let me know if you need anything else in the future.
Okay, thank
Best
you.
wishes to everybody with your adoption and grants.
All right, bye.